I want you to close your eyes for just a second.
Okay. Setting the mood.
Yeah, just trust me here. Imagine you are standing on the edge of a precipice. But this isn't, a cliff edge in the traditional sense. You're not looking down into a deep canyon or off the side of a mountain.
Right.
You are standing on a shoreline. And the ground right beneath your feet is crunchy. It's salty, almost like a hardened crust of snow, but it's hot.
Very hot, usually.
Exactly. And you're looking out at a body of water that feels ancient. It looks metallic under that harsh, high desert sun. It's vast, spanning the horizon. And for millions of people living right next to it, this water acts as a massive, very precarious switch.
It's effectively a kill switch for the entire region.
A kill switch. That is the perfect way to put it. Because if that switch stays in the on position, the region thrives. I mean, the economy hums along, the ski resorts have their famous snow, the ecology functions, and people are healthy.
But if that switch flicks off...
Yeah, if it flicks off, we are looking at a scenario that the researchers in this massive stack of reports we're covering today are calling an existential threat.
It's a really heavy term, isn't it?
It is.
Existential threat. In our line of work, when we're looking at policy documents and environmental data, you usually reserve that phrase for, nuclear proliferation, or maybe a massive asteroid impact.
Something that ends the game entirely.
Exactly. But in this case, we are talking about a lake, specifically the Great Salt Lake in Utah. And when you actually dig into the hydrology assessments, the medical studies on dust toxicity, and the legislative text that we've been reviewing, you realize that phrase isn't hyperbole.
Not at all.
It is a very precise mathematical description of the hydrological and socioeconomic reality facing the Intermountain West.
And that is exactly what our mission is today. We are taking this stack of terrifyingly detailed sources, articles, government reports, academic papers, and we are doing a full deep dive into the crisis at the Great Salt Lake.
And we should probably set the table right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this isn't just a nature documentary story. We aren't just talking about saving some birds.
Though we will definitely get to the birds.
We will, because they are actually the canary in the coal mine here. But fundamentally, this is a story about whether a major American metropolis, Salt Lake City, and the entire Wasatch Front can actually survive its own geography.
It really is a test case, isn't it? A question of whether a modern civilization can stop itself from, destroying the very foundation it sits on.
That's the core question driving all these reports.
So to understand the stakes for you listening, we have to start with the setting itself. What actually is this lake? Because I think for people who haven't been there, or honestly even for locals who just drive past it on the freeway with their windows rolled up, it's just that smelly body of water out to the west.
Geologically speaking, it's a ghost.
A ghost.
Yeah, it's a remnant. It is what is left of the massive Pleistocene-era Lake Bonneville. So imagine an inland sea that covered a huge chunk of Utah, and even parts of Nevada and Idaho.
Just a massive body of water.
Massive. And as the climate warmed over thousands of years, that massive sea evaporated, and the Great Salt Lake is essentially the puddle left at the bottom of the drain. It is the largest saline body of water in the Western Hemisphere.
But the most important characteristic, the thing that defines absolutely everything we are about to discuss today, is that it is a terminal basin.
A terminal basin, yes.
Let's unpack that term immediately because it sounds a bit morbid, like a terminal diagnosis.
It does sound grim, but in hydrology, it's just a mechanical description. It just means the water flows in, but it doesn't flow out.
No outlet at all.
None. There is no river carrying water from the Great Salt Lake to the ocean. The water enters via the Bear River, the Weber River, the Jordan River, and then it just stays there. It's trapped.
So it's like a bathtub with the tap running, but you've plugged the drain permanently.
Precisely. And that creates a very specific, very delicate equilibrium. The surface elevation of the lake is essentially a constant battle between two immense forces. You have the fresh water coming in from snowmelt and rivers on one side, versus the evaporation pulling water out into the atmosphere on the other.
And for thousands of years, that battle was relatively balanced, right?
Yeah, the lake level would oscillate naturally. It would go up in wet years, down in dry years, but it stayed within a healthy functional range.
But recently, the sources say that equilibrium has been broken.
Shattered is probably a better word. The equilibrium is gone. In 2022, the lake hit a historic record low. So that switch we talked about earlier, it started flickering.
And the thesis of the research we are looking at today, specifically the reports from the Great Salt Lake Strike Team, which for those listening is this elite group of researchers from the local universities and state agencies, their thesis is that this desiccation, this drying up, is not just a scenic tragedy,
Right, they call it a hydrological and socioeconomic imperative.
which is an academic way of saying if we don't fix it, the money stops, the people leave, and the place becomes unlivable.
Uninhabitable. If the lake goes, the Wasatch Front, where nearly 3 million people live, could become uninhabitable due to toxic dust and economic collapse.
That word, uninhabitable, is the part that really sticks with you. So let's get into the why. This brings us to the etiology of desiccation.
The cause of the drying.
Exactly, which is really just asking, who killed the lake? Or, I guess, who is currently holding the knife?
It's a bit of a murder mystery, but honestly, the fingerprints are everywhere.
I feel like if you ask the average person on the street in Salt Lake City, or really anywhere in the West right now, the common answer is usually, well, it's climate change, it's the mega drought, the sun is hotter, the snow is melting too fast, it feels like a weather problem.
That is the most common misconception. And frankly, the researchers highlight that it's a dangerous one because it's a convenient narrative. Well, if it's just the sun, or cycles of nature, then it absolves us of responsibility. We can just shrug and say, well, Mother Nature is angry, what can we do? But the numbers in the strike team report tell a very different, much more uncomfortable story.
Okay, let's look at the numbers then. Is it the sun?
Only partially. When the researchers did the attribution analysis, basically figuring out which slice of the pie chart belongs to, which caused climate change accounts for about 9% of the loss.
Only 9%. That seems incredibly low given the massive heat waves we've seen in the West.
It's roughly 9% attributed specifically to aridification. That's the drying of soils and increased evaporation due to heat. Now, 9% is not nothing. It makes the problem harder to solve because the atmosphere is thirstier. It wants that water back.
Right.
But the primary driver, the research is unequivocal here. It's human activity. Specifically, what they term consumptive use.
Consumptive use. That sounds like a highly technical euphemism for we drank it.
Or we moved it. We are diverting the water before it ever has a chance to reach the lake. The data shows that between 67% and 73% of the lake's elevation loss is directly due to humans diverting water from the tributaries.
Wow.
To put a hard number on it from the reports, Utah diverts at least 2.1 million acre-feet of water annually.
Okay, I always struggle to visualize acre-feet. I know it's the standard unit in water management, but what does that actually look like to a normal person?
Think of an American football field from end zone to end zone.
Okay, got it.
Now imagine it covered in exactly 1 foot of water. That's an acre-foot. Now imagine 2.1 million of those football fields stacked up.
That is a staggering amount of water.
It's more than 600 billion gallons every single year. Because of these diversions, the data from 2020 to 2023 shows the Great Salt Lake received less than 1/3 the natural stream flow it should have gotten.
Less than 1/3. So we are essentially starving the lake. We've put a tourniquet on the main arteries feeding it.
We have. And the water budget equation, which sounds really complex in the papers, is actually quite simple math. It's delta S equals P plus R minus E minus D.
Okay, hold on. I promised the listeners we wouldn't turn this into a calculus lecture.
I know.
But walk me through that, because I think understanding those variables really matters here.
It's just the formula for the change in storage. Delta S. That's the lake level.
Right.
P is precipitation, meaning rain directly falling on the lake itself. R is runoff, so the river's flowing in. E is evaporation, the sun taking its share. And D, where D is diversions.
The human variable.
Exactly. P, R, and E are largely nature's domain, though obviously climate change affects them slightly. But D is a knob that we turn. And over the last century, we have cranked that knob up to 11. When D spikes, the equation goes negative. The lake crashes. It's not a mystery. It's just math.
So if humans are the main culprit, if we are the D in the equation, we have to look at which humans, or rather which industries. Because I take long showers sometimes, but I don't think I'm personally using 2.1 million acre-feet.
No, your shower is a rounding error in this budget. Domestic indoor use is actually very efficient because most of it gets treated and put right back into the system. The real issue brings us to the elephant in the room.
Or maybe the cow in the room.
Exactly. Agriculture.
And this brings us to a major conflict point in the sources, the agriculture versus urban debate. I feel like this is where the tension really spikes in the local community. The source material shows it gets political fast.
It is the most sensitive part of the conversation, without a doubt. But the data from the state is overwhelming. Agriculture is the dominant user of water in the Great Salt Lake Basin.
By how much?
Depending on the year and how you measure it, whether you look at total depletion or total diversion, Agriculture accounts for between 63% and 82% of all water diversions.
Up to 82%. That is massive. So almost 4/5 of the water that isn't reaching the lake is going straight to farms. What are they growing? Is this all local vegetables for the farmers market in Salt Lake? Are we eating this water?
Mostly, no. The culprit, if you want to call it that, though, the farmers in the report certainly object to that term, is alfalfa,
Alfalfa. So hey,
livestock feed. Here's a sticky fact for you from the strike team reports. 1 ton of alfalfa requires about 1.38 acre-feet of water to grow in this specific high desert climate.
okay, connect that back to our household metrics so we can really feel the weight of that.
That 1.38 acre-feet is roughly equivalent to the annual water use of 2 typical Utah households, just to grow 1 single ton of hay.
So one truckload of hay costs as much water as 2 entire families use in a year.
Correct. And here is the kicker that shows up in the economic analyses. A significant portion of that hay isn't even feeding Utah cows. Some of it is exported internationally to places like China or Saudi Arabia.
Wait, so we are taking the water that keeps the region habitable, putting it into a crop that is incredibly thirsty, and then shipping that virtual water overseas.
That is the global economics of water right now. We are essentially exporting our water in the form of dried grass. The reports note that Saudi Arabia, for example, actually banned the growing of alfalfa in their own country because it uses too much water. So they buy from Arizona and Utah instead.
That is mind-blowing. I can see why people in the city get frustrated when they read that. But we have to be fair here, presenting both sides as the sources do. Farming isn't just an industry in Utah. It's the culture. It's the pioneer history. Deseret, the honeybee industry, it's all about working the land.
Absolutely. And the sociocultural tension here is what makes solving this so difficult. The reports highlight that fewer than 2% of the population in Utah is actually employed in agriculture. Economically, it's a tiny slice of the state's GDP.
But culturally,
Culturally, it is massive. It's the state's identity. Farmers often feel completely scapegoated by the media and politicians. They look at the city expanding, the skyscrapers going up in places like Lehi, the massive tech boom, and they say, hey, I'm just doing what my grandfather did. I have the senior water rights. Look at all those new condos. Why aren't you blaming them?
which perfectly segues into what the researchers call the myth of urban water savings. I have heard this argument so many times in city planning meetings and op-eds. The idea that if we pave over the farms and build houses, we actually save water because houses use less water per acre than alfalfa fields.
It sounds incredibly intuitive, doesn't it? Alfalfa's thirsty, people are less thirsty. But recent longitudinal studies from the universities prove this to be largely false.
Really? Why is that?
Two main reasons emerge from the data. First, development isn't just happening on old farmland. It's happening on natural land sagebrush, foothills that was never irrigated before.
Oh, I see.
So when you put a sprawling subdivision on a dry hillside, you are increasing the net demand for water from zero to whatever that subdivision uses.
You're adding new straws to the milkshake where there weren't any straws before.
Exactly. And the second reason is we have a massive lawn problem.
The green carpet obsession.
We are addicted to Kentucky bluegrass in a high desert environment. The studies show that in the four most populous counties in Utah, over 75% of land use changes between 2008 and 2023 resulted in a net increase in water use.
Why such a huge increase?
Because up to 90% of municipal water in some of these areas goes strictly to outdoor irrigation, lawns and ornamental landscapes. We aren't drinking the water, we are literally dumping it on the grass.
And I've seen some of these suburbs, they aren't exactly using high-tech, perfectly calibrated drip systems.
No, many are using what's called secondary water.
Right, I saw that term in the legislative reports. What does that mean practically?
These are old agricultural canals that used to water fields, but now they pipe untreated water directly to suburban backyards. People pay a flat fee, maybe $200 a year, for unlimited outdoor water. Because it's unmetered, there is no price signal to tell them to stop.
So they just leave it running.
Worse, they flood irrigate. They open the gate and flood the yard just like it was a cornfield. It is incredibly inefficient.
So the argument that urban sprawl saves water is flawed because we are essentially trading inefficient farms for inefficient suburbs.
Exactly. The idea that urbanization automatically saves the lake is a myth. We are just changing the type of straw we are using to drink the milkshake. The reports conclude that unless we change how we build moving to smaller lots, native plants completely eliminating lawns development is just another massive form of depletion.
Okay, so the water is disappearing. The D variable in our equation is way too high. Let's talk about what actually happens to the lake itself when that water level drops. Because the sources emphasize it's not just about the shoreline moving back a mile or two, exposing some mud. The fundamental chemistry of the water actually changes, right?
It does. And this is where we hit the ecological tipping point. The Great Salt Lake is a hypersaline ecosystem. Life there depends on salt, but only within a very specific range. It's a Goldilocks situation.
Too fresh, and the brine shrimp die. Too salty.
And the brine shrimp also die.
Hmm.
The optimal salinity for the South Arm, that's the main body of the lake where most of the recreation and biology happens, is between 9% and 12%. But as the water volume drops, the salt concentrates. It's like boiling down a sauce on the stove.
The water leaves, the salt stays.
Exactly. And in 2022, the salinity in the South Arm spiked to 18%.
18%. That's incredibly salty. That's bordering on the Dead Sea.
It is toxic to the life that has evolved there. This triggers a catastrophic chain reaction. It starts at the bottom with the brine shrimp.
Sea monkeys, I feel like everyone knows them from the back of vintage comic books, but they are a real massive industry out there.
A huge commercial industry. They're harvested by the ton for commercial fish food globally. But biologically, at that high salinity, they get incredibly stressed. They stop producing cysts.
Cysts being their eggs.
Yes, they're dormant eggs. And those cysts are the absolute foundation of the entire food web for the lake. At the same time, the shrimps are crashing. The brine flies, which are those bugs that cover the shores and those thick black carpets, they start to die off too.
I hate the flies, I'll be completely honest. Walking through a cloud of brine flies is nasty, but the biology reports say we absolutely need them. Why do they die when the water drops?
Their larvae live underwater on these strange rock-like structures called microbiolites.
I saw pictures of these in the reports. They look almost like brain coral.
That's a great comparison. They are living rocks, basically complex bacterial mats that have built up over thousands of years. As the water recedes, these microbiolites are exposed to the open air. They dry out and they die. They turn into bleached skeletons. And no microbiolites means no habitat for the fly larvae.
And if the bugs die, the birds are next.
This is the avian collapse scenario outlined in the ecological surveys. We are talking about 10 million migratory birds across 350 different species. Eared grebes, American avocets, Wilson's phalaropes.
I read this section about the eared grebe. They undergo this crazy physical transformation, right?
It's incredible biology. They arrive at the Great Salt Lake and essentially digest their own wing muscles.
They eat their own wings.
Internally, yes.
Whoa.
They metabolize their flight muscles to build up their stomach and digestive organs so they can gorge continuously on brine shrimp. They double their body weight. They temporarily become flightless blobs of fat. They rely entirely on the Great Salt Lake as a critical gas station to refuel before flying down to South America.
So they completely dismantle their engine just to build a bigger fuel tank.
Perfect analogy. But if they show up and the gas pumps are empty, if there are no shrimp, they can't refuel. And because they've already digested their flight muscles, they can't just fly to another lake. They are trapped. They die there.
So the entire flyway collapses, millions of birds starving. But the sources point out it's not just starvation. I read a terrifying section about land bridges forming.
That's a massive development for the nesting birds. As the water recedes, islands that used to be completely safe havens, like Gunnison Island, which hosts one of the largest American white pelican colonies in the world, become connected to the mainland.
The protective moat dries up.
Exactly. Suddenly, terrestrial predators like coyotes and foxes can just walk right across the dry lake bed and raid the nesting colonies. It's a massacre. The pelicans are completely defenseless on the ground. The wildlife divisions have already seen pelicans abandoning their nests en masse because of predator intrusion.
And we are also losing the wetlands around the lake, which act as vital filters.
Yes, 400,000 acres of wetlands are drying up. And to add insult to injury, as the native cattails and bulrushes die off from lack of fresh water, they're being replaced by a highly invasive species called phragmites.
Phragmites. That's the tall, really dense, reedy stuff that blocks the view of the water.
That's the stuff. It's a hydrological villain in this story. It sucks up even more water than the native plants did, and it creates these thick, impenetrable monocultures that the native birds can't even use for nesting or foraging.
It's like replacing a lush, diverse forest with a concrete wall.
It's a total lose-lose for the ecosystem. It accelerates the water loss and ruins the remaining habitat.
So the ecosystem collapses. The birds die. The islands are raided. The wetlands turn into invasive weeds. That is undeniably tragic. But I know some listeners might be thinking, perhaps cynically, okay, that's sad for the pelicans, but I live in the city, I work in tech, I don't go bird watching. How does this affect me?
And this brings us to a really dark pivot in the research. the nightmare scenario, the toxic playa. This is where the existential threat to human life becomes very, very literal. When the lake recedes, it leaves behind the exposed lake bed, which geologists call the playa. As of the recent data, nearly 800 square miles of this lake bed are now exposed to the open air.
800 square miles. That is a massive amount of dirt. That's bigger than the entire island of Maui just sitting completely bare.
It is vast.
Yeah.
But here's the critical part detailed in the public health reports.
Yeah.
It's not just dirt. It's not beach sand. It's a highly concentrated chemical cocktail. Remember, we established earlier that the lake is a terminal basin. Everything that has flowed into it for over a century stays there.
Right. There's no drain. So every industrial accident, every mining operation over the last 100 years.
Exactly. Mining runoff, smelting byproducts from the early 1900s, modern agricultural pesticides, treated sewage. It all flows down and settles at the bottom of the lake. It's been safely locked away under the water for decades. But now, the water is gone. The bed is drying out, baking in the sun, and turning into fine dust.
So what exactly is in this dust? The toxicology reports must have a breakdown.
The list reads like a hazmat warning label. Arsenic, mercury, lead, copper, manganese, uranium, antimony.
Arsenic keeps coming up over and over in the medical research papers. Why arsenic specifically? Is someone dumping it there?
Arsenic actually occurs naturally in the geology of the region. But because it's a terminal basin, it is concentrated in the lake bed over thousands of years to levels that are highly concerning. And breakthrough research from the University of Utah shows that this specific dust has a very high oxidative potential.
Oxidative potential. Okay, that sounds like something I definitely don't want in my lungs. What does that actually mean in plain English for the person breathing it?
It means the dust is highly reactive chemically. When you inhale it, it doesn't just sit there. It chemically attacks your lung cells. It causes massive, immediate inflammation. And it is highly bioavailable, meaning your body rapidly absorbs the toxins. It enters the bloodstream.
So we aren't just talking about a persistent cough or some seasonal allergies. What are the actual long-term health impacts outlined in the medical literature?
We're talking about severe, chronic, and acute conditions. The dust contains particulate matter, specifically PM2.5 and PM10. The PM2.5 is the really scary stuff. It's so small, 2.5 microns or less, that it completely bypasses your body's natural respiratory defenses. Nose hairs, mucus, coughing, they can't stop it.
It's too small.
Right. It goes deep into the alveoli of your lungs and passes straight into your blood.
And once it's circulating in the blood?
The epidemiological studies show it causes heart attacks, strokes, and severe vascular disease. It triggers asthma attacks and exacerbates COPD. It is a systemic poison.
And the reports mention it affects specific vulnerable groups more than others, right?
Absolutely. Maternal health is a huge, huge concern highlighted in the data. Exposure to these specific heavy metals is linked to preterm births, low birth weight, and congenital birth defects. Children, whose lungs are still actively developing, face permanent developmental delays and diminished lung capacity for the rest of their lives. And the elderly are at a very high risk of acute respiratory failure during a dust event.
So we are talking about a slow-moving public health catastrophe. How many people are actually in the danger zone for this dust?
Roughly 2.8 million people live directly downwind of the lake. The prevailing wind patterns in the valley, especially ahead of a storm front, blow that dust right off the playa and funnel it directly into Salt Lake City, Davis County, and up into Ogden. One severe windstorm is a regional medical emergency.
Now, I read a section about a crust that is currently protecting the valley. It sounds like we are walking on thin ice, or I guess thin salt.
That crust is the only thing saving the city right now. The geological surveys show that about 91% of the exposed bed currently has a hard salt crust that physically holds the toxic dust down. It acts like a protective cap. Only about 9% is actively blowing and creating dust right now.
Okay, so 91% is secure. That sounds okay.
But, and this is massive but emphasized in the research, that crust is incredibly fragile.
What breaks it down?
Time, mostly, and erosion. If the lake bed stays dry for too long, the wind naturally erodes it. There's this physical process called saltation, where little particles of sand blow across the surface, bounce along, and chip away at the hard crust like tiny hammers.
Just slowly wearing it down.
Exactly. Also, paradoxically, rain can destroy it. Rain that isn't heavy enough to fill the lake can actually dissolve the top layer of the salt crust. Then when it dries again under the sun, it dries as a loose powder instead of a hard protective shell.
Oh.
And physical disturbance is a huge factor. If people drive off-road vehicles on it, or if animals walk across it in large numbers, it breaks the seal. Once the seal is broken, the dust is free to blow.
And if that crust crumbles on a large scale, what's the precedent?
The researchers point directly to an Owens Lake scenario.
I've heard this comparison brought up a lot. What exactly happened at Owens Lake?
Owens Lake in California was drained in the 1920s to send drinking water to Los Angeles via an aqueduct. It dried up completely. Within a few decades, it became the single largest source of particulate pollution in the entire United States. The dust storms were so toxic and abrasive, it literally peeled the paint off cars in nearby towns.
That's horrifying. And they had to fix it eventually, right?
They were legally forced to. It cost the city of Los Angeles $3.6 billion to mitigate the dust.
Billion with a B.
Yes. And it's not a one-time fix. They have to constantly pipe water back out there to flood shallow pools, put down miles of gravel, and physically till the soil to create clods that don't blow away. It is an endless, massive money pit.
And the Great Salt Lake is, how does it compare in size?
It's much, much bigger. Owens Lake was about 100 square miles total. The Great Salt Lake's exposed bed is already 800 square miles. If we let the crust completely fail here, the mitigation cost would be absolutely astronomical. The engineers in these reports suggest it might actually be financially impossible to mitigate.
So we're essentially sitting next to a toxic time bomb, just hoping the fragile crust holds together while we figure this out. That feels intensely precarious. But surely money talks. If the public health argument doesn't move the needle fast enough for the politicians, the economic projections have to.
The economic fallout projections are staggering. You simply cannot run a thriving modern economy in a toxic dust cloud. The economic analyses estimate that right now, the lake contributes between $1.3 and $2.5 billion annually to the Utah economy directly.
Where is all that money coming from?
Three main pillars: brine shrimp harvesting, which we discussed, mineral extraction, and tourism. But if the lake fully collapses, the estimated economic damage to the state is $25 to $32 billion over a 20-year period.
Let's break those pillars down based on the reports. Start with the minerals. I genuinely didn't realize how critical the lake was for global supply chains until I read this section.
It's globally significant. The Great Salt Lake provides about 14% of the entire global magnesium supply. A company called U.S. Magnesium operates out there, and they are the only producer of primary magnesium in all of North America.
And what is magnesium used for? Why is it so critical?
It's essential for everything lightweight: aerospace components, aluminum cans, automotive parts. It's heavily used in strategic defense materials. If the lake dries up, their intake pumps, which suck up the brine, are left high and dry. They physically can't pump the water, the factory shuts down.
So it's not just a local job loss, that's a national security issue.
Exactly. The Department of Defense actually monitors this.
And then there is the skiing, the greatest snow on Earth. That's literally stamped on the state license plates.
That slogan is trademarked for a very scientifically valid reason. The lake creates what meteorologists call lake effect snow. When cold winter storms move over the relatively warm, salty water of the lake, they pick up massive amounts of moisture and dump it as incredibly light, fluffy powder in the Wasatch Mountains. It's a unique microclimate.
But the dust is the killer here too, right? It's not just about losing the moisture for the snow.
Correct. When that toxic playa dust blows up into the mountains, it settles on top of the snowpack, darkening the snow.
Like wearing a black t-shirt on a sunny day. It absorbs the heat.
Exactly. It lowers what scientists call the albedo, or the reflectivity of the snow. The darker snow absorbs much more solar radiation. The hydrologic models show that dust on snow events increase the melt rate by 25 to 50%.
So the snow melts drastically faster, which means the ski season ends maybe a month early.
It devastates the ski industry. And it ruins the natural hydrology cycle even more, because that water comes rushing down the mountains too fast in the spring, causing floods, instead of trickling down slowly all summer to feed the reservoirs.
It's a vicious cycle.
It really is. The very thing that drives Utah's billion-dollar winter tourism economy is being actively undermined by the lake drying up.
And on top of the skiing and the minerals, I imagine it's pretty hard to sell a luxury condo or recruit a tech CEO to a city where the air quality might give you a stroke.
Real estate devaluation is cited as a massive looming risk. We have the Silicon Slopes Tech Hub down in Utah County. Corporate recruiters are already reporting that the pollution is a powerful deterrent. If you can't guarantee your employees can breathe the air safely, you don't move your corporate headquarters there.
It makes sense.
The financial reports note it impacts municipal credit ratings, bond issuances. It spirals quickly. It turns a booming economic engine into a ghost town.
Okay, we have scared everyone sufficiently, I think. The lake is dying, the birds are starving, the air is turning to poison, and the economy is at risk of crashing. Let's pivot to the response. Is anyone actually doing anything? Or are the policymakers just watching this train wreck happen in slow motion?
No, to be fair to the policymakers, the legislative reports show there has been a very significant shift in the last 3 years. The overall strategy has moved from outright denial to crisis response, and now they are entering a phase they call long-term stewardship. For starters, we now have a great Salt Lake Commissioner, Brian Steed.
A czar for the lake, essentially.
Basically, yes. His official mandate is to herd the cats. He has to get the farmers, the cities, and the heavy industries to all agree to leave water in the rivers to get it to the lake.
In the state legislature, are they passing actual binding laws or just writing resolutions saying, we really like water?
They are passing real consequential laws with teeth. In the 2024 to 2026 legislative sessions, we saw some big wins documented in these reports. HB 453 was a landmark piece of legislation. It finally strictly regulates the mineral extraction industry.
How so? What did it change?
Before this bill, the mineral companies had a lot of historical leeway. They could pump vast amounts of water into their evaporation ponds. Now, the law forces them into cooperative agreements with the state. Basically says you can't just pump the lake dry to harvest salt during severe drought years.
So the state can intervene.
Yes, it gives the state the explicit power to throttle their intake if the overall salinity of the lake gets too high. It prioritizes the lake's health over extraction volume.
That's a big shift. And what about the urban lawns we talked about, the green carpet problem?
That was addressed by HB 318, which strictly limits turf in new builds.
How strict are we talking?
It basically dictates that if you build a new subdivision, a commercial property, or a new government building, you can't just slap down wall-to-wall Kentucky bluegrass anymore. It mandates highly water-efficient landscaping. No grass in park strips, limits on backyard turf size.
We also saw some surprising donations in the news, right? I heard the local church was involved.
Huge historic donations. Compass Minerals, one of the big extraction companies, voluntarily donated 200,000 acre-feet of their water rights back to the lake. And the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, donated 20,000 acre-feet of their agricultural water rights permanently to the state.
Permanently. That's a massive asset to just give away.
It shows how seriously the major institutions are taking the threat. And the state also stepped in directly. They bought the water assets of U.S. Magnesium for roughly $30 million just to secure those rights and keep the water in the lake.
So they are actively buying back the water.
Yes, they are putting this water into a legal trust specifically dedicated to the lake's elevation.
There is also this really cool engineering and legal term I saw in the commissioner's report, precision shepherding.
Ah, yes. That solves a really tricky legal problem in Western water law. The problem of shepherding the water.
Meaning what, exactly?
Under the old laws, if a farmer at the top of the Bear River decided to save water and leave it in the stream to help the lake, there was no legal mechanism to stop another farmer 50 miles downstream from just legally pumping that extra water out for their own crops.
So the saved water never actually reached the lake.
Right. But precision shepherding uses new telemetry technology and updated laws to tag and track that specific saved water all the way down the river system to guarantee it actually flows into the lake's mouth. No one else can legally touch it.
So there is real movement. The laws are changing. But reading through the sources, there is also massive controversy. And this is a big one. It's the great debate over the Bear River Development Project.
This is the ultimate battleground in Utah water politics right now. The Bear River is the largest single tributary feeding the Great Salt Lake. It provides about 60% of the total inflow. But there's a massive infrastructure project authorized by the legislature several years ago to dam and divert 220,000 acre-feet of water from the Bear River before it ever hits the lake.
Wait, pause. Let me get this straight. We just spent all this time talking about how we desperately need more water in the lake. We are spending tens of millions buying back water rights. We are killing our lawns. Companies are donating water. And this state plan wants to build a pipeline to take 220,000 acre-feet out.
That is the core of the conflict. The proponents of the project, which are mostly the large municipal water districts, they look at the demographic data. They say, look, the population of Utah is projected to double by 2050. We absolutely need secure drinking water for those new millions of people.
And they think the river is the only source.
Right. They argue it's much cheaper and politically easier to build the dams and pipelines now, securing the water rights, rather than waiting until there's a massive urban water shortage.
Yeah.
It's a $2.9 billion proposed project.
And the opponents? What do the environmental reports say?
The opponents call it ecological suicide. The hydrologic modeling shows that executing this diversion would drop the lake level another 8.5 to 14 inches permanently.
Which exposes even more of that toxic playa.
Exactly. And locally, it would completely dry out the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge, which sits right at the delta. That is one of the most critical habitats on the continent. The ecologists say it would be catastrophic.
I mean, just reading the two sides in the reports, it seems totally counterintuitive, bordering on insane to spend billions of taxpayer dollars to save the lake, while simultaneously planning to spend billions of dollars to build a massive tap to drain it faster.
It is the absolute definition of cognitive dissonance in public policy. The legislative records note that a lawmaker, Senator Bluen, actually tried to legally redirect the funding from this development project straight into lake restoration.
Did it work?
No, the bill failed. The project is currently stalled. They haven't started pouring concrete or anything, but it remains fully authorized by the state. It's like a loaded gun pointing directly at the lake's recovery.
So, synthesizing all of this, let's get to the final verdict. We have donations, we have a new commissioner, we have turf buybacks, but we still have this massive pipeline project looming. Are we actually saving the lake?
The honest answer, drawn directly from the strike team's latest projections. We are stabilizing the decline, maybe. But the gap between where we are and where we need to be is massive.
How big is the gap? Let's give the listeners the raw numbers.
The consensus science says that to reach what they define as the healthy minimum elevation, which is 4,198 feet above sea level, by the target year of 2055, we need an additional 800,000 acre-feet per year flowing into the lake.
800,000 acre-feet? Let's go back to our visual. That's 800,000 football fields of water. 1 foot dip every single year.
On top of what we are already letting flow down the rivers.
And the recent wins you mentioned. The church donations, the mineral company water, the lawn savings. What do those add up to?
Optimistically, they amount to around 400,000 acre-feet of savings. Maybe less, depending on how wet the winter is.
Yeah.
So we are about halfway there at best. We need to double our current conservation efforts just to get to a basic healthy level in 30 years.
That sounds like it requires far more than just taking shorter showers or letting the grass turn yellow in July.
It requires radical structural measures. The reports talk about establishing a new normal. Agriculture, mathematically, has to cut its total consumption by roughly 35%.
35% across the board.
Yes. And that implies a massive shift in how the state operates. We need to build a permanent, multi-billion-dollar water leasing market.
Basically paying farmers a fair wage not to farm.
Exactly. Or doing what they call split-season leasing.
What is that?
It means making a deal with an alfalfa farmer that says, go ahead and grow your first, most profitable crop of hay in the spring. But then turn off the water, let the water go to the lake for the rest of the hot summer, and the state will pay you the cash difference for the crops you didn't grow.
It keeps the farmer whole financially, but saves the water.
Exactly. But we need massive sustained funding for that. We need hundreds of millions of dollars every year to make that market work at scale.
And what about the city dwellers, the tech workers in the suburbs?
A radical landscape shift is required there too. The reports suggest moving to native plants almost entirely and implementing aggressive tiered water pricing.
Meaning the more you use, the exponentially more expensive it gets.
Right. A basic amount for indoor use is cheap, but if you want to water an acre of grass, you pay a massive, prohibitive penalty. And if the state wants the lake visibly restored by the 2034 Winter Olympics, which is a major political goal mentioned in the documents, we need even faster, far more aggressive cuts than what I just described.
It's a very daunting picture.
It is. But let's zoom out for a second as we wrap this up, because the source material emphasizes that this isn't just a local Utah story.
Right. You mentioned the Aral Sea earlier in our research.
The Aral Sea in Central Asia is the literal ghost of what could happen here. It was the 4th largest lake in the world. But the Soviet government diverted the rivers feeding it to fuel a massive cotton farming industry in the desert.
Cotton over there, alfalfa over here. The parallels are pretty stark.
It's the exact same story. The Aral Sea turned into a toxic, hypersaline desert. The local health crises were unprecedented. Anemia, kidney disease, infant mortality skyrocketed in the surrounding towns. It completely destroyed the region's economy and ecology. The lake is just gone. It's a cautionary tale etched right into the earth.
So Utah is actively trying to avoid becoming the American Aral Sea.
Exactly. The researchers explicitly frame Utah as a global test case. The entire world of hydrology and ecology is watching.
Because the stakes are so universal.
The fundamental question is, can a highly developed, wealthy democracy voluntarily pivot its entire economy to save a foundational ecosystem? Can we actually value the future stability of the region over our immediate consumption and historical habits? Or are we too paralyzed by local politics and short-term profit to stop the train?
That is the ultimate question we have to face.
And here's a final thought from the latest data for you listening to Mull Over today. The Great Salt Lake is currently sitting at the third lowest recorded elevation as of 2025. The toxic dust crust is largely holding for now, but time is absolutely not on our side.
Because every dry, hot year makes that crust just a little bit weaker.
Exactly. So the challenge presented by all this research is this. This isn't just a debate about water rights or saving a specific species of bird. It's about fundamentally revaluing the very foundation of the Intermountain West.
Because if the lake dies, the city likely dies right along with it.
That's the harsh bottom line of the science. No lake, no life.
On that incredibly heavy but completely necessary note, thank you for listening. This has been The Deep Dive. Stay curious, and maybe go check your water bill. We will see you next time.